Hey everybody, Chris here with Christcross Crafts. Today we're going to walk through tramming a CNC, more specifically my Axiom Elite CNC. And I'll tell you, if you're a CNC owner, this is something you're going to want to see. Yeah, anyway, having these machines dialed in and running at tip-top shape is really where you want to be, especially if you're doing a lot of precision cuts. So follow me along, we'll walk through the steps and the tools I needed to get the job done. So the first thing I did was just to make sure that the spindle didn't slide down any. I did make a couple marks on the spindle just to give me a reference, but I put 2 blocks on the back that are sitting on the housing, and then the front block is actually sitting up, so that if I have to make any adjustments, I certainly can. But that is how I started that, and this little hose clamp, that's all that is a dust collection hose clamp, and you can see that ain't going nowhere. So let's get this thing started. So there's a lot of ways you can get this done, but I decided, since I'm a machine owner and I've invested a lot of money, I wanted to go ahead and get a tool that was going to last and be very accurate. So I picked up this Stupid Simple Tools Tramming Jig, and it's got multiple spacing on it, but the idea is this will allow me with these dual dial indicators to be able to precisely get this thing set up. So I've got my tramming jig. I've got a piece of glass. You can use any kind of good flat surface, granite, just about anything that you know is true and you know that is flat. I chose this piece of glass. I've gone ahead and made a few marks on here just for reference only. I've got my set of Allen wrenches for making adjustments on the router housing, and I got a cheap set of feeler gauges to do any spacing that I may need to do. Beyond that, I've gone ahead and pre-mounted something on my spindle to keep it from slipping once I loosen these 4 bolts, and we'll go from there. So let's get started. Okay, so now we're going to set this up. All right, so I want to make sure and dial this in on a specific point here. So let's get this plate turned. We'll get this dial turned to where that reads 0. Now it's important that this not turn at all, that it has to stay like this. Otherwise, it's going to throw your measurement off. So you want to make sure that your line is perfectly straight and this doesn't move, which that's pretty good. So now we are set to 0. I've got the bezel set to the 0 point, so let's move it straight across. Okay, so you can see that this piece of glass needs to come up just a little bit. So let's get some paper and get that done. All right, so I've got two pieces of paper folded over on this corner to get this to 0. Let's confirm over here that this hasn't moved. Spot on. All right, let's go check this front corner. Needs a little bit there. I'm going to move my little jig just so I've got better access to it. There we go. So let's go look at all 4 corners. Spot on. Okay, now that I've got my glass level, I'm going to make sure that this second indicator is properly lifted up. I'm going to come over and 0 out that indicator. Now there's 2 trains of thoughts here. Some people say that you need to move your other indicator to the same spot. The problem is if your X is out, and you just slide across and you move your gantry to make this line up with that, then you're zeroing off, you're not accurate. The proper way to do it is if your x-axis is off one way or the other, is to simply rotate this 180 degrees after you zero the bezel on the one, rotate that 180 degrees to the same spot, then lower this one down and zero it out there. Because if your X is out, at least this way, it's going to be out the same way here. So I'm going to turn this on, zero it out, and then this will be ready to rock and roll. Okay, well, we're going to start with the Y-axis. The reason being, if you start with the X, you're going to have to keep unbolting those front screws, and every time you do, you're just going to mess up what you just did. So start with the Y first and get the front to back dialed in. And in this case, on the Axiom, I originally was going to take that back bracket behind the spindle off and shim that, but I wound up finding out that there are little pinholes in there, and that for alignment, and opted to try to do it this way instead. And it seems like that was a better, quicker option. And it worked. It took me several tries to get the right measurement, but after a little bit of trial and error, a 6,000th shim on the bottom of the spindle was what it needed. And as you can see, snake eyes. Next up is the X-axis. I rotated everything 180 degrees and took some initial measurements to see where I stood. Now I already had the shim in there behind the spindle, so I didn't want to undo that all the way, but I just loosened that just slightly and used a little pry bar / screwdriver to give it a little bit of wedging. And that's really all it took, just a little bit of movement, and got that X dialed in pretty good. And just like the Y, it did take a couple of tries because it did sort of want to ease back into where it was. But after a little bit of muscle, I got it down. Turned out pretty spot on. And as you can see, we're at all zeros. And that's what you're looking for. Rotate that around all four corners, and you want that to be zeros all the way around. Okay, 5/10. Okay, well there you go. This is Chris with Christcross Crafts, and this is how I dialed in my CNC utilizing the Stupid Simple Tools Tramming Jig. This thing is so nice. It's very accurate, repeatable, and even though I changed out one of the indicators just for video purposes, it does come with both of those indicators, and they are very accurate and easy to adjust. In the past, I did use something like this, which is nothing more than a piece of angled steel. I cut off a bolt head and then used the threads to hold that in, and then that got chucked into the chuck. Then this held the indicator on the end. I also used a block of wood, but what I found with using these other methods was they weren't as accurate and repeatable. That's why I upgraded to this, because I really want to dial my machinery in right so that I know when I'm making cuts or other operations that this thing's going to be dialed in. And I do plan on taking this over to the drill press and making sure that my zero on the drill press table is in fact zero. So there's a couple other pieces of machinery that this will work with, but for now my CNC is dialed in. I'll dial in my drill press later, but this is Chris using the Stupid Simple tool to dial in and zero out my Axiom Elite CNC. And just in case you were curious, go ahead, like, subscribe, click that notification bell, because you're going to want to be notified next time I release a video. At least I hope you are. Anyway, this is Chris with Chriscross Crafts, and we will CNC you later. I happen to pick up a more specifically, how to trim my Axiom Elite CNC. Yours will probably be very similar, so you'll want to hold tight and watch on to this. Watch on. What is wrong with you? Having these things run at tip-top shape is where you want to be. I don't know, take 4,000. If you're a CNC owner, this is something you're gonna want to see. Yeah, so learn it. Oh, that was so bad.